Development Subcommittee. We're so glad to have you here with us today. Before I jump into introducing the session, just a few housekeeping points here. This session, as you may have just heard, will be recorded, and a link to the recording will be shared on the Atlantic Association of Planners website. We'll also send a follow-up email with the link. Our session is an hour and a half today. The first hour will be presentations, followed by a 20 to 30 minute question and answer period. While we'll address all questions within the Q&A period, please feel free to post your questions in the comments box at any time. So just look up to the top right of your window there. I'll read through as many questions that you've shared as possible in the time that we have today. So, and the speakers have agreed to have their emails shared for follow-up questions. So today's session may be just a start to other conversations. Last point for registered professional planners, this session provides 1.5 CPL learning units, and the session is currently available in the drop-down box on the Canadian Institute of Planners CPL webpage. So today's session is on housing. Affordable housing has emerged as a national and a regional priority. It is now a prominent part of political, public, and media discourse. It's on the CBC here in Fredericton quite often. While planners understand the problem, finding solutions has been difficult. The city of Fredericton currently has two interesting projects underway. They address different slices of the housing spectrum. One is a non-profit, detached, tiny home social enterprise development, and the other is a private sector micro-suite apartment development that uses a conventional building envelope to introduce many more housing units. Our speakers today include planning staff from the city of Fredericton, as well as the developers of each of these two projects. First, we will have Marcello Badalana, Manager of Community Planning with the City of Fredericton. And Marcello will provide a bit of information on the city and set the scene for those who may not be as familiar with it. And then next we'll hear from Marcel Lebrun. He's the founder of the 12 Neighbors community, a community of 96 tiny homes and social enterprise center. Sean Day, architect and planner with Micro Boutique Living, will then speak about the micro suite apartment development. And he may or may not add a few philosophical points, we'll see. And then our closing speaker will be Frederick Van Royen, planner with the City of Fredericton. Frederick will speak about housing within Fredericton from a planning perspective, so including the tools that planners are using. I will now hand things over to Marcello. Thank you, Marcello.
Thank you, Susan, and good morning, everyone. I'm loving seeing all the names pop up. It's great to see. So I was asked to provide a brief overview of Fredericton in order to add some general context on the housing challenges that we currently face. And like many other municipalities in Atlantic Canada, Fredericton is undergoing a change, or rather a transition from a large town to a full-fledged city. And it has become very apparent that the growing pains are felt more acutely within our housing sector. So as planners, we were aware early on of this housing shift, and in 2015 began the long road of developing a growth strategy and the new municipal plan for the city. And as I had said, all intents and purposes was really with respect to that shift from a town and how we were essentially entrenched in a urban suburban bias. So what we had to do is we had to open up the growth strategy and really have a conversation with the community as to how to transition our city and be more adaptive to the pressures around housing. So just for my purposes, 20 years ago when I first started in Fredericton, the discussions around just a simple townhouse development was hotly contested. And if you were to add any affordable housing units into that discussion, it was even more difficult. There was a lot of NIMBYism around that issue at that time. And then fast forward to today, many of the applications that we're dealing with, both the public and our council are saying, you know what, if you're going to proceed with a development application for, let's say, over 100 units, where are the affordable housing? So there has been a significant transition and a shift when it comes to affordable housing and what the public is really asking of us. So when it comes, maybe go to, oh, that's good. So with regards to our population, we are at generally estimated around 62,000. As I mentioned, we have our growth strategy, and by 2041, we expect a growth of about 92,000 more people. The key drivers of our growth is the knowledge economy, and in particular around our tech industries and our universities, and of course, we are a government town. Some of the things of note within our growth strategy is we really wanted to get a tagline out there with respect to our growth. So what we wanted to do was, as I mentioned, that shift in thinking. The tagline around the growth strategy was really to grow in and to grow up. And Frederick, if you just touch the boundary of, so what we did in order to achieve that was we created a growth boundary around the city of Fredericton. So that's on the periphery. Yeah, right there. So all of that is the growth boundary for the city of Fredericton. So basically anything above that is basically we want to keep in rural and or agricultural, and then everything drive development to kind of the core, which is our red. And the yellow represents our emerging neighborhoods. So that's where we want to see more intensive development take place, as well as in our core. So that's the area identified in red. So next slide. So just to give an idea of our development, so this is out of our well, last year, so 2021. As you can see, we for total units, so this number represents apartment units, single families, townhouses. So we were able to achieve a number of 799 units. So that's, as you can see, from 2015 all the way to where we are today, that's a substantial amount of growth. We're well above our 10-year average and well above our 5-year average for context. Next slide. So this zeroes in on all of our multiples, our multi-unit starts, and you can see that we're at 698. Again, this was a record year, and that number has been growing consistently since 2015. We've more than doubled our 10-year average. So there's a lot of development happening, and it's happening in all those sectors as I identified, both in the core, but also in those emerging neighborhoods as shown in yellow. So next one. So this is some of the information that was gleaned out of our housing needs assessment. So this was prepared by Turner Drake. Neil Lovett and his team did a wonderful job in assessing the issues that we currently have in our housing market. And as you can see, when it comes to rents, those are rapidly increasing. So 28% of rent in the last couple of years has gone up. The other thing that you're looking at the graph, and that's as of 2020. You can see, for instance, for the yellow or I'm not sure how it represents on your screen, the yellow or the orange, that's our one bedroom. So when you look at that line, that cross section of line for housing affordability, the above that line are the folks that can't afford their rents. So in Fredericton, when it comes to one bedroom apartments, we have 60% of folks that can't afford their one bedroom apartments. And incidentally, we just had an application that went to council on Monday night, and the developer was for 178 units, and the developer had said that from his perspective, the one bedroom apartment to be affordable now is beyond the 800 and is around the $1,500 mark. So there is an ongoing issue with affordability in Fredericton, and this graph kind of highlights that information. So next one. So the housing snapshot when it comes to our vacancy rate. So the gray area represents where municipalities should be in to represent a healthy vacancy rate. And ultimately, as you can see from 2017 onward, we're not in a great spot when it comes to vacancy rate, and that is essentially across the boards from 1 bedrooms to 2 bedrooms to 3 bedrooms. And when you really think about it, when you look at our city, it's the area in red that I had shown earlier, the core area. The vacancy rate in there is pretty much at 0. We've had many discussions with our development community, and they can't build them fast enough in that core area because they have waiting lists of people that want to live in that area. So the vacancy rate is a little bit different from the different spots within the city. So I wish I could see the other side of that slide. So when it comes to the housing needs assessment, it was gathered that shelter and short-term rental housing there's a rapid growing need. It's estimated that we need to have at least an additional 50 spots made available for that to kind of deal with that issue. But also there is a need of at least 1,500 more affordable housing units coming into Fredericton. So we do have issues. From our perspective, we've been working away at those. And hopefully, and through the work with Turner Drake, what we're working on next is a affordable housing strategy. And so we hope to have that up and in our hands by at least the end of February, so that we have a better strategy going forward. So I guess my job now is to turn it over to Marcel Lebrun.
Awesome, thank you, Marcello. And Susan, if someone could give me presenter status while I do, oh, there we go. Needs to use accessibility features, look at that. So yeah, if you could give me, present, oh, hang on a second. All right, so I'm gonna go and give GoToMeeting accessibility features apparently while I'm introducing myself. So I'm the founder of 12 Neighbors, and by background, I'm a tech entrepreneur. I've worked in the software industry most of my career, and I am always been interested in poverty in general, poverty issues. And so, oh, hold on. Okay. To share my screen, GoToMeeting's requiring me to restart. So I'm just going to talk for a little bit and then I'll do the restart. So I've always been interested in poverty issues, and specifically in our city, Marcello outlined some of the challenges that we have. And 5 or 6 years ago, I was excited about a strategy that the city had announced with our plan to end chronic homelessness in Fredericton. And I got involved in that just as a supporter, donor, and thought we were going to, build a lot of housing first units. And about 6 years later, the housing stock has declined. I think everyone's experiencing that in every city across the country where the market's going up, and so housing stock is being flipped from affordable to higher end, and so there's a decline in the stock. And meanwhile, in our city, our by names list has doubled over that 6-year time period, so our chronic homeless population has gone up. And so as an entrepreneur who's become kind of a social entrepreneur, I wanted to do something, and I began a research journey. And what I'm going to do, I'll promise I'll be really quick, is I'm going to restart GoToMeeting. I'll be back in 15 seconds. then I'll,
15 seconds. I was gonna say, Marcel, we could go to Sean and then come back to you after. We could just flip the order and give you time to restart.
if I'm not back in 15 seconds, do that. All right.
Okay. Okay. Deal.
And
Thank you, Marcello, for your overview of Fredericton. It's really fascinating how things have changed over the last little while. And I don't know if anybody saw the impacts of COVID coming, 3 years ago. So
how
it's
is that?
oh hey, okay, well done. That was quick.
Okay, so now just give me presenter status again, and I should be good to go.
Okay, all set there.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
If it's giving you grief, we can give you a bit of time to play
Yeah.
with it, because I know you've got your video as well.
Oh,
So we could.
I'm all set. I'm all set.
Feel set? Okay.
Can
Okay.
you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay,
It's
so
but it's not in presentation mode.
I got it.
Okay.
So basically, what we're doing is building a tiny home community with. Oh yeah, anyway, don't worry about that. I'm building what I call a dignified tiny home community where housing is just the beginning. And what I decided to do is I did a lot of research, and I'm going to just skip to a few things, but I visited many cities across Canada and the United States and some in Africa. And what I became really focused on is that this challenge, that most efforts at reducing poverty ultimately fail. Why do they ultimately fail? And what are the best models for success that result in true lasting change? And what I concluded is that most efforts fail because they're emergency based or they're relief oriented. And so we're all familiar with those things: shelters, food banks, out of the cold, government safety nets, i.e. payer of last resort. And all those things are classified as relief efforts, and they help in the moment, but actually they don't help transform a situation. And in fact, they can actually work against lasting transformation because they normalize the emergency situation. And so they don't help people overcome these gravitational forces of poverty. So what you have to do is invest in development, and specifically, for those that are into this, the concept of asset-based community development is quite evidence-based and well developed. And it's difficult work. It's much more difficult than relief. And so we tend to like relief. We tend to like throwing money at urgent needs because it feels like the right thing. And often it's well intended, but often quite harmful. So I didn't want to just do that. And so I spent a lot of time saying, who's doing the best job? And I visited places, and I'll show you a little video clip of one of them. But, places like Homeboy Industries in Los Angeles, the largest gang rehab reentry program in the world that employs 400 ex-gang members. I went to, the highest homeless population or between LA and San Francisco in North America, and in the Tenderloin district in San Francisco. Spent time with the guy who controlled the most notorious block in the city for 20 years as the crack dealer, and who's now helping people get up off the ground. And how's he doing it? And I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, the least upwardly mobile city in the United States, where if you're below the poverty line, you're most likely to stay there. And what are they doing to help young people who don't have expectations, or no one has a narrative that says that they have any expectations of higher education? And then places in Canada like Garden Hill First Nation, or in Winnipeg, where I looked at the Winnipeg Social Enterprise Center and some of the Indigenous owned social enterprises and what they're doing to help people transition. And also in Accra and Ghana, a lot of us think that, in developing countries that some of the problems are materially different, but you got a city like Accra that has 30,000 homeless youth that make their living, squeegeeing cars in front of luxury condos and airports with private jets and things like that. So very similar situations. At Calgary, around the Alex Community Food Center and some of the work that they're doing. And basically, here's my thesis. My overall thesis is this, that if all you do is address someone's circumstances, and most of the time that's what we focus on, circumstances. Someone has no housing, someone's hungry, those kinds of things. I call that a poverty of circumstance. What happens is you take a poverty of circumstance, you add that to systemic barriers, and these are just systems that you and I deal with every day that we take for granted, but they work for some people and they're barriers for others. I use just a simple example of a speeding ticket. You know, if it's designed to be fair, you speed, you get a ticket, incentive not to. But if I get a ticket, I pay it and I move on. Someone else gets a ticket and maybe it's groceries, rent, or the ticket. Well, the speeding fine isn't designed to break you, but if you're poor, it can break you. And so the systems are biased against people that are struggling in their circumstances. But you live in that for a while, then you get what I call a poverty of identity. And that's when it becomes really rooted in the narrative of who you are. And that results in a loss of dignity, hope, sense of worth, purpose, autonomy, feeling like you have agency in your life. And what works effectively is, if you want to help, you actually have to work at the identity level and at the system level and invest in developing that capacity. And you do that by helping people with dignity, hope, a sense of worth, those kinds of things. So all that to say that from my research in all of these places, I've kind of synthesized the best of what I've observed and said, okay, how do I apply that to our community in Fredericton based on our needs to try to help people transition, and hopefully also to build a model that shows government that this is a really smart way to invest dollars because of the immediate overall social return relative to investing in emergency needs. Because we know there's only one true solution to homelessness, and it's housing. Interestingly, a lot of people might say, oh, the real root cause is mental health or addictions. But actually, if you look at the statistics, 95% of people with mental health issues are housed, and 95% of people with drug addictions are housed. So it's incorrect to say that. Now, is there a disproportionate level of mental health and drug addiction issues among those who are struggling without housing? Yes, absolutely. But they're compounding issues. Often the root is some form of trauma, and these other issues are kind of intertwined and follow from it. So that's what we're building, this dignified tiny home community, and we're investing as much time in the cultural and social design as we are in the physical design. But I will give you a little glimpse of both of those. And it is based on the principles of housing first, which says, okay, yeah, I need a roof over my head before I can work on other things. But we say housing is just the beginning. So what we're really working hard to create is a place where I use three words: dignity, community, and opportunity. And so how you treat people, most of our relief-oriented emergency services are inherently undignifying. They reinforce your less than narrative. When you have a means test to prove that you're poor enough or broken enough to receive services, when you have an unusually high number of rules to comply with that are designed to be convenient for the service provider, all those things are reminders that that you're less than. And so we are setting up our social infrastructure to treat people with dignity. and then to give people community, because a lot of times they're and their transformation path, leaving a community, and you could take someone who's in a tent city and pay for a apartment for 5 years and put them in it and find them back in the tent city, and you say, what is going on? But you realize that maybe you put them in an apartment and they're uncomfortable with the people around them, they don't know how to relate to them, the people that have their back, that they both trust and don't trust at the same time, their relationships are back in the tent. So you have to not just plop someone in a physically safe place, but you have to plop them into a community that's supportive. And then, of course, the third word is opportunity. And that is one of the most powerful lessons I learned in all the places I visited, is just the power of having something to do and something to work on, ultimately a job. And Homeboy Industries, they say nothing stops a bullet like a job. And you know, if you come out of jail and the only thing you know how to do is sell drugs, use drugs, and you don't think anybody else will ever give you a chance at work, then all you can do is sell drug, use drugs. So you think, oh, are they choosing to do that? Most of these guys said, I just didn't think I had a choice. This is the only thing I know how to do. And so someone else comes along and says, actually, I think you can learn some other skills. They don't believe it at first. And so for us, we want to create a path to opportunity. So what we're doing in our community is creating a social enterprise center, which will have 3 training businesses initially focused on food, retail, and construction. 3 really great entry-level jobs where there's lots of demand. So we'll have a cafe, a retail and art shop, and actually a warehouse where we are doing the tiny home construction ourselves, and we'll be able to engage people in skill development in doing that. So that's kind of where we're at. I'm going to show you just a photograph here. This is an interior picture of one of the tiny homes. You can see the back left is the bathroom, stand-up shower, sink and toilet in there. There's the kitchen, which is pretty sizable. It has an induction stove top and an air fryer, microwave, some open shelving, lazy Susan storage under the cupboards. Above the kitchen and bathroom, you can see kind of an attic loft area. That's for storage, and it's also a utility room where the hot water tank is and HRV. And then the front part is the living area. The table and chairs are collapsible into the wall, and as well the couch on the left pulls out to become a double bed. These are super insulated. I think you need 4 bodies to heat this place, so we are way above code on the thermal envelope. We're also putting 3 kilowatts of solar on each home, and more importantly, we're laying these out in a very kind of community-oriented context. And so I'm just going to show you a video quickly. This is a walkthrough, and I'll explain a bit of the community. This is obviously a rendering here. And so basically we're on, just to give you context, we're on a 65-acre parcel, but we're developing on 8 acres. And this entrance to a parking area would be kind of the public area. Now this rendering is a little bit more conceptual than what it will actually look like. So the Social Enterprise Center is kind of under design at the moment, but you've got this cafe that's public facing. We want this to be a very accessible place. It's not isolated. It's not, we don't want to create a stigma. And so in the back of the building, we have some space for community members to come in and do laundry and hang out. And what's really important with tiny home living is that you also have some extended spaces for people to kind of get out of their space and socialize in other spaces. And then, you know, our construction area here where we have some jobs. And so then we call it 12 neighbors. Every community member gets 12 neighbors. So we have these little blocks where on each side of our main street, we have 6 homes. You're looking at kind of 3 facing one way, 3 facing the other way. And while our density is quite good, getting 100 homes, which can house up to 200 people, there's single or double occupancy in 8 acres, there is a lot of green space. And there's kind of, it's designed to have 4 levels of privacy. So on one level, I'm in my house with the door locked. Level 2, I'm on my front porch or in my little private yard. Level 4, you can see there are common spaces like a community garden. And sorry, level 3 is my little neighborhood of 6. So there's like that area that belongs to me and my 5 neighbors. And based on where you're comfortable, you can, you know, have a small social circle or kind of a larger social circle if you want to be an active community member and be planting in the garden and, you know, things like that. So that gives you the idea. Now in this rendering, all the homes look the same. And that's not our intent. We're going to have some different designs, but for now we went with one because it's tough enough getting you guys to approve one that I'm just joking. I had to throw some kind of planner jab in there somewhere. That we're going to have some different designs there as well. So that's I think a bit of the overall view. In terms of where we're at the moment, I'm going to stop presenting here. Can I do that? No. We are about to have our first community members move in tomorrow, actually. And we've been working at getting the community up and running for a few months. We have 12 sites currently ready to go, and we have 4 homes built, and we're building about 2 to 3 a month. And we're excited because we actually just powered up our first homes on site yesterday, and I went and checked this morning. It's -31 and they're warm and toasty. So we're going to be bringing our first couple in tomorrow. And interestingly, they've been married 8 years and living in a tent for 5, and we're really excited to have them. So I'll leave it there and then happy to answer any questions afterward. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Marcel, and congratulations again on getting things up and running. During our last our planning session for this webinar, Marcel was in one of the homes, and it was beautiful. So it's really exciting to see things moving forward. Congratulations. Okay, so next we'll move over to Sean. So Dylan, you could please give presentation mode to Sean. That would be great.
It's Sean Day, right?
You got it. Yes, thanks, Dylan. How are you doing, Sean? Oh, look at that. All set. It's showing in presentation mode there, Sean. Thank you.
And right on. I don't even know. I can't see how I turn on my camera, but I guess it doesn't matter.
Yeah, we'll go with your voice for now.
Right on. Oh, there it is.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Hello, all. Marcel, that was amazing. Thanks so much for that. It's I think I'm going to be chatting with you about a lot of things after a while, after we get through all of this. I struggled with what to put even on the title of this, because was it a discussion about micro boutique living, micro units, or was it a discussion about affordable housing? And I decided it was really a discussion about micro or affordable housing, and micro boutique was actually the minor part of the discussion. And like Marcel, I think it's, I just gave a little bit of background on myself. And guilty admission, for the first, I don't know, 19 or 20 years of my life, I thought I was going to be a car designer. So if you think it's bad as a planner that I now work on the development side of things, you'd probably think even worse of me now. But that all changed after I visited Detroit and decided that a career there wasn't for me. So with nothing better to do, I moved to Paris. And ended up living on a boat. And that kind of is where my journey started, because I was, not only was I living in one of the best walkable cities I think there are, but also I was living in a very small space. And it was a great education for me about the other ways we can live, having grown up living in Nova Scotia in a kind of a suburban setting. From Paris, I thought, well, you know, maybe architecture is the thing I ought to do. And I think primarily because my address was Porte de Plaisance, Paris, France, I was accepted into an architecture school. It was tons back then in Halifax. And architecture morphed into planning, urban design, and community design became kind of the thing that was driving my interest over time. That landed me in Antigonish, which was a place I didn't know much about when I first went there. I thought I'd maybe be there for a year, and it's been over 20 now. It's a great little community. My work there was focused on creating a new plan for the town. The old plan was all about big lots, low buildings, segregation of uses. Parking was out in front, and there was lots of it. So all of that, and I guess to some extent, not only based on my education, but also my time living in Europe, it became more about narrower and taller. It became more about mixed use, and it was really driven by ideas about creating great streetscapes and great places for community engagement. I worked there for quite a while, did every job you could do. I was a building inspector, a planner, a heritage officer, eventually the department head. And through that period, the university doubled in size, and it came actually ultimately to be larger than the town. So our population more than doubled every year for 8 months of the year, which led to a massive housing crunch and very high rental rates. So living through that and working through that has been very informative for me. I was given the opportunity in 2015 to step outside of that world and go work on a large waterfront mixed-use project in the Dartmouth waterfront called King's Wharf. 30 acres, largely water lot, was an old marine site, boat building site. And ultimately, there's going to be 3,000 people living there. That was an incredible experience. And again, it was drawing on background of my travels and living elsewhere that helped inform that, and my love of creating great streetscapes. So that's some of my background. I thought it was important too to look at the background of what we're dealing with here, and Marcel did a fantastic job talking kind of about the social side. There's a lot of things driving the housing affordability crisis that are really beyond our control. And we have to accept those and understand that they're there. And just quickly running through some of those, we've got a lot of mudslides and tornadoes and fires and floods and things like that. Those are going up in terms of severity and frequency, and it results in a lot of destruction, which increases demand for building products. And this is an example of a factory that was taken out by a tornado. In the States, there was a large resin factory taken out, one of the largest and principal ones in North America. That had a huge effect on material prices, particularly anything that relied on resins. So that's things like plywood, LVLs, OSB, all of these sorts of building materials doubled and tripled as a consequence of this. And also because of labor shortages in factories, in mills, trucking challenges at the border. All of these things have had a huge impact on us and continue to do so. We're also trying to work in a way that's more respectful with nature. This little guy, he looks fierce, but he's an endangered turtle in New Brunswick. He's a wood turtle. And our site in Fredericton, which I'll show you later, was impacted by this little guy because he was thought to possibly be present on the site. And it almost stopped the project because we were really challenged to get our application through Department of Environment. We had to change our methods of storage of materials on site and do all sorts of other things to make sure that this guy was going to be safe. So that's just an example of something that we're going in the right direction, but it does change and increase and slow down the possibilities for development. Our WAWA permit, which has to do with watershed development or development close to watersheds and wastewater and putting drainage water into watersheds. Took almost 3 months to get through that process. So that was, again, that's a long period of time to be wondering if your project was going to get approval. We're moving toward being more inclusive and equitable in terms of how we develop. And one of the things that's really come on strong in the last while is increased accessibility in our built environment. And that's a fantastic idea. We're definitely moving in the right direction, but we're moving very quickly. And the cost to develop buildings as a consequence of this has gone up quite a bit. Marcel pointed out, for example, that a wheelchair accessible shower costs 3 times what a regular shower does. And that's just one thing. There's also considerable space impacts about how much space you need to create a barrier-free path of travel, the size of doors you have to use, and all sorts of other things. This is all creating a situation where you have a development that costs quite a bit more, but which there currently is inadequate demand for. So that's something we need to be aware of as we move in this direction. There's notions about lifestyle and what is the good lifestyle that we're up against. And that creates ideas about what kind of housing is suitable for people and where they're going to live and how they're going to live. Buildings have become a lot more complex. Construction has become a lot more complex. And now when you do even a fairly small project, you've got a team of experts that you're working with. I don't know if you guys can you see me at all in this picture? Probably can't. I'm holding up now 2 small books. That's the size of the building codes back in 1985. And the pair of building codes that you now deal with are about 4 or 5 times larger than those ones in 1985. Just to get a sense of the increased technical side and code related side of construction. This is people working in cafes, the gig economy, which I suppose I'm part of now. This changes the ability to pay and the certainty of the ability to pay on a month-to-month basis. This is another thing that we can't really do much about, but which is a change happening in the world. So with all of that going on, what are the things we can change? And there's quite a few. And I think that the onus is on us to work in the planning field to really push on this and to lean into it. So right off the bat, I'd say, and I think, I'm sure I'm preaching to the converted here, we need to not incentivize what was the normal form of development. And I don't need to go into the reasons why, but I will suggest that that does lead to less livable urban areas, increased costs to municipalities, and definitely creates kind of a car-centric way of living. This is impactful in just about every negative possible way. And municipalities spend vast amounts of resources maintaining this kind of infrastructure, and those are resources that could be used elsewhere. It also leads to downtowns that look like this. This is land that has to be maintained, plowed, acquired, and that's land that's not available for housing and for stores and amenities. It also creates an environment that is less amenable to a pedestrian or active transportation kind of lifestyle. So again, we need to really think about the kind of policies and parking requirements and everything else we have, and when we're writing regulation, to be wary of these sorts of things. I mentioned municipal costs before. This is meant to represent a municipal office that no longer has any staff. I could have shown this a lot of different ways, but different development patterns definitely impose different kinds of costs or possibly confer benefits financially to municipalities. The low density sprawl style of development is generally thought to be a money loser for municipalities. And so again, do we continue to build in that way or incentivize that or make that easy versus other more challenging, I suppose, in terms of prospective ways of development? Also, if you haven't run across Chuck Marone and the Strong Town organization, their work is amazing, talking about development patterns and the kinds of costs they impose on municipalities. I highly recommend you check that out. So Fredericton has an amazing built heritage. It's kind of mind-blowing when you travel through it. But to what extent do we let that create our future or drive or control our future? And this is a really challenging conversation to have in a place like Fredericton, as it is in any community in Canada or North America probably that has a strong heritage legacy. These kinds of structures generally are kind of spread out. They're larger than typically families need now. And how do we advance our regulations so that they continue to cherish these and honor them, but at the same time reflect the changes that we're experiencing and will continue to experience with respect to housing? You've all seen these guys. This is meant to evoke laughter. I can't tell if anyone's laughing, but I'm hoping at least some of you are. As planners, we all face this. It's a challenge. It's really hard. But at the same time, we need to work harder to ensure that we bring these guys out at least with open minds and informed about what we're going to be talking about. They're not angry because you're necessarily making change to affordable housing or density. They're mad because they think somehow their lifestyle is threatened. And that's where their focus is. So we need to change the conversation with them so that they, are more open to discussing the kinds of changes that we have to see happen. And our policies, and I've already spoken a little bit about this, the policies we write as planners, they do impact housing costs. So again, we have to be careful to incentivize the kinds of things we want and not disincentivize the things that we don't want. How much cost do our policies add to the cost of construction? Because those costs will be passed on to the ultimate user, the residents. And so we really have to balance the regulation that we write, about things like equity and affordability and density, so that we can ensure that builders are able to actually put buildings on the ground in our communities. This leads to the last thing in this set of slides, is the notion of us versus them, the kind of relationship that a lot of planners have with the development community. We need to move away from that and understand that we're in this together. The planners are looking at it for the larger community interest. They're writing the policies and regulations and creating the framework in which development happens. But ultimately, the developers are the ones who are actually building the projects. And we need both, and both need to get on. And I think that we can all work to improve the dialogue between these groups so that we do have a more cooperative approach. So just briefly, a couple things to consider. We need to decide on the preferred models for development of new housing, and what's it going to be, what's it going to look like, and where is it going to be. Don't make it hard to do. We need to incentivize the good stuff and not incentivize the stuff that we don't want or don't need any longer. We need to reduce the uncertainty and risk with clear policy. And maybe some of our tools that we cling to need to go, things around setbacks and nature of use and parking and things like that. We also have to be really careful about long approval processes. The carrying costs in construction are huge, and they can break projects, which is not what anybody wants. Lastly, we need to be clear to the public that we can't continue in the way that we've been in the past. They need to understand that change is happening and that we're all part of that change, we'll all be affected by that change, and that we all need to participate in creating the kind of new communities that we need to create. So with all of that behind me, jumping now into the micro boutique story and a little bit about Chris. Chris grew up, at least up until he was a teenager, in Malta, which, parts of which look like this. So you can see that his vision of what housing looks like before he came to Canada was rather different than what he arrived to. That said, he moved originally to Vancouver and was there for about 10 years watching that city grow. And so different forms of housing weren't new to him, nor were cities. When I met Chris in Antigonish, where he had moved ultimately to become a prof in the business department, we both got into sailing and spent a good bit of time careening around the waters around Antigonish on cramped sailboats. They teach you a lot about living in small spaces as well. About 15 years ago, he asked if I might like to go to Europe and investigate micro hotels with him. And so we did. The one I'm showing right now is in Birmingham, England, and it really is patterned after a ship cabin. And that was a growing trend then. Chris was becoming disenchanted with life in university and wanted to, instead of talking about business, he wanted to actually be an entrepreneur and start something. And for those of you who have traveled to Europe, you will have probably noticed that a lot of people live in boats because that is an affordable form of housing in Europe. And I think that somehow this is helpful in thinking about all the different ways we can live and where we can live. It's not just in kind of typical development. Now, here we are in Antigonish. As I mentioned, Chris was interested in getting into more entrepreneurial mode, and he purchased a property on Main Street in Antigonish. We allowed mixed use development with as much residential basically as you could put above and below and behind the commercial portion of development. His first project included, let me just get this little pointer guy here. In this portion of the building right here, he developed 5 micro units. He decided not to do the hotel route, but rather to do something that had more like an apartment, but it was going to address both short and long-term stays, because of course we have half of a population which is student for 8 months of the year. And so they enjoy the 8-month leases, and then in the other 4 months, it turns into a short-term rental. And with the success of that, the back of the building was developed with 30 more units. These units are quite small. They're only about 200 square feet. And let me just move here to this. You can see here the layout, very simple, Murphy beds, and very successful. The 60% of this, the people living there are students. You might think it would be higher. So that means that 40% are not. They're year-round leases. They're from all walks of life. And for the whole development of 35 units plus the commercial portion, we have 7 parking spaces for this. And it hasn't proven to really be a problem. The natural evolution of this was to look at the next university town in Antigonish, or in Nova Scotia rather, that has a similar kind of population. That's in Wolfville. They also double in size through the student year. And once again, a property just off center block of Main Street was acquired. This property is about 15,000 square feet, and ultimately we ended up with 65 units on this lot. There was lots of neighborhood opposition. They thought it was terrible that people would be crammed in such spaces, while at the same time they didn't want them in their residential neighborhoods. So I'm not sure why they would have been against this, but nonetheless they were. At the end, however, council and staff supported it, and the project moved ahead. This is a nice night shot of the building, showing the commercial. And here you see the evolved unit. It's quite a bit larger than the Antigonish model, and one has been around for a while. So we've introduced things like sliding glass screens. They're semi-transparent or opaque, and they reduce the size of walls and things in the units. And everything in these units, which are fully furnished, are designed around the small space. Now, moving to Fredericton, we knew that this was going to be a different kind of situation because the university has a much smaller presence in Fredericton. But we also knew that there was a growing housing shortage, that the university, while small, had a lot of grad students, that there is a substantial tech sector, that there was immigration from other countries, so those with different notions about how one lives, and that it was cycling friendly, and ultimately there was an undeveloped site in the core, but not in the Platte, the historic area. So this is how Chris landed in Fredericton, seeking approval to develop a much larger micro unit there. However, it was a really tricky site. It's bounded by the Trans-Canada Trail, which is separate in ownership from the road, so access was an issue. It's a very steep site. It rises 3 stories over a short distance. It has a major drainage ravine running right through the middle of it, and all of that is why it was still available, because people had looked at how to develop it over the course of time and weren't able to find a path to make it happen. There was also no clear supporting policy for the kind of density that you can achieve with microlofts. And the community was known for its resistance to out-of-the-box thinking, something that Marcello referenced at the beginning. However, there was the growth strategy, and this was fantastic. It's a great document, and it really helped us think about how to repurpose or rearrange our micro unit development so that it would suit the circumstances of Fredericton as opposed to those of Antigonish or Wolfville. It gave really solid documentation about the need for change of direction in Fredericton. It talked about the 30,000 or so new residents that would be coming. And as Marcello noted, it directed growth to the core area. So this kind of created a situation which was really helpful to our proposal. Mostly though, there was supportive planning and engineering staff, and I can't overstate how important this was in terms of allowing us to move forward with what was a very unusual development for Fredericton. Looking at what we could have done just with the regular zoning, we could have done 28 townhouses. These are 20 feet wide. As you can see, they don't fit on the site very well. But because of the steepness of the site, there really wouldn't have been a good way to arrange these. We also wanted to consider, what would happen if we did 48 regular units. So that's what that might have looked like. But then you think, okay, well, here's our space that we use to put 48 units up. What if we did 130 micro units? And so this building represents, I think it's 132 micro units. And then there's an annex building, a part 2 with another 30. So from this 28 to ultimately 160 units on the same property. I'll do this one. Developed in consultation with the city, we decided to do this in 2 phases, which I think is really wise. The first phase is the larger building, a bridge across the ravine, some outside parking. Most of the parking is actually inside. And the city agreed to let us do 1/3 of the normal parking. We're at 1 space for every 3 units. And that was based upon an agreement to start car share, which is a pretty exciting option. And also it's based upon the fact that there's good bus routes here and you've got immediate access to the Trans-Canada Trail, which can get you downtown on a bike at least in about 5 minutes. I brought my bike there to test that. Second phase would be this 30-unit building, but that's contingent on our notions about not needing so much parking working out. That may have to be kept for expanded surface parking, which would be unfortunate, but it is possible. These are some of our mix of units. We had a much bigger mix of units in Fredericton than elsewhere because of the understanding or expectation that we would have groups of people living together. We may have small families. We've got some 2-bedroom units, which are somewhere in the 300 square foot range. The 2 bedrooms or the single bedrooms rather, have grown to about 260. We also introduced some 3-bedroom units, which have kind of a sawtooth approach. Because we're a sprinkler building, we don't have to have windows for all the units, but we use a lot of transoms to receive borrowed light in units. And this is considered more of a den, possibly, than a bedroom. But these guys are in around just over 500 square feet for 3-bedroom units. And this is it's actually a rendering of what the inside of one of the single units might look like in Fredericton. So some of the advantages of the microlofts, obviously you need less land for the number of units you want to do, and smaller lots are easier to find, especially if you aren't required to put in vast amounts of parking. Parking is incredibly expensive to develop, especially if you have to do it underground. Building smaller units requires fewer materials, less labor, and with small spaces, sharing 5 of 6 surfaces, usually there's only 1 wall that's exposed to the outside, they're incredibly efficient to heat and cool. And if they're in a low to medium rise style, which is what we're doing, they've got enough roof area for enough solar to run the building and to run our solar cars, or our electric cars rather. The model is scalable and adaptable. We've gone from 5 units now to potentially 160 in the course of about 10 years on different kinds of properties in different kinds of places. And the modular development is an option in Wolfville. It was developed with using modules that came from New Brunswick, actually. And it was pretty amazing to see these 60-foot long units, 2 28s plus a hallway flown into place, and how quickly the building came into to being. Rents tend to be about 15 to 20% below market. So these aren't addressing the people that Marcel is seeking to house, but they do help with the supply issue, which creates upward pressure on rent rates. Efficiency and sustainability basically are baked into the micro-unit approach. Just briefly on some communal and municipal advantages, particularly of low to medium rise infill development, which is what we focus on. So it encourages active transportation. We only develop in places which are within walking distance of amenities. And that in turn encourages physical and mental health and social cohesion. You're out on your feet or your bike, you're meeting people, you're happier when you arrive at work, you're more energized. It supports small local businesses, and it's less about supporting big box retail on the outskirts. It supports transit. We anticipate putting a lot more people on buses that show up on either side of our development. And there's, I think, a pretty substantial improvement on return on investment of infrastructure and services for municipalities when you develop in this fashion. Now, I was asked to speak about financing. Financing is not my field, and I wasn't really involved in this. Unfortunately, in my planning experience, I didn't learn about land economics. It's something I'm learning on the fly. And largely due to the challenges of this site, the project was more expensive than our projects in Antigonish and Wolfville. This project wouldn't have happened without the CMHC funding that we received. So what's good about it? Right off the bat, it's a 95% loan to value funding rather than the kind of usual 75%. So if you're looking at a $2 million development, which is a fairly small one, that's the difference between coming up with 100,000 down payment versus 500,000. I'm going to jump out of this. This slide was meant to be removed. My bad. And so that money that a developer would have to come up with, say 500,000 in a normal property development of a $2 million project, is on top of land acquisition costs, design, engineering, contingency, insurance, and all these other things. That really becomes a substantial financial burden to starting a project. So what were the challenges that we faced with the CMHC Flex program? First of all, they asked us to do double the number of barrier-free units. And I already mentioned that these are definitely more expensive to build, and there's not much demand for them right now. So you actually pay more to build them, but can't charge as much rent for them. And so this puts a challenge on the financial viability of the project. Beyond that, they were looking for adaptable and universal units. So beyond what the code would require. And in order to gain favor with this, technical issues. Hey, Susan, can you hear me?
Hi, Sean.
Yeah,
Hi,
I can.
so have I been talking to no one for a long time?
No, I've been able to hear you.
Yeah, it's
Yep,
working.
we've been able to hear you.
Okay,
Sean?
I just got a notice from Susan saying we're having technical issues.
Sean, can you hear me?
I'm hearing someone speaking right now, yes?
No,
Yeah,
you're all good, John. We can hear you and see your screen.
Okay, I'll jump back in. All right, back to the challenges. So I spoke about that. CMHC wanted us to improve upon the 2015 energy code by at least 20%. So the 2015 code is something that's already challenging builders in many respects to achieve, and we were meant to do 20% better than that. Part of the problem with this is that it's based on units, and there's no differentiation between a single family home in suburbia versus a micro unit in a multi-unit building. And so, as I mentioned before, our units are already, like, efficiency is already baked into these units. They're vastly more efficient at housing people than, you know, a typical single family home would be. There was no consideration of that. They were also looking for greenhouse gas emission reductions. So this was part of the equation. And this led us to have to pay, I think it's $25,000 to do a study on our building envelope and all the materials and everything else in the building to meet these. I'm going to show you a slide on that in a second. The process was massively time consuming. The amount of work that Chris did, submitting paperwork and talking to Cmhc is, well, basically all he did for months and months to get this into place. And not everyone will have that time or skill set to do that. That said, the process of doing the energy analysis was amazing. We worked with a firm called Morrison Hershfield. They're based out of Ontario or Toronto, but they do have an office in Halifax. And they were able to model the building that the architects came up with. And we could look at where to apply extra money to achieve higher rates of efficiency. And I lost my little pointer thing here. Have I flipped my screen? I think I have. Yeah, that's better. So you can see here a range of wall R values, and you have to look at thermal bridging and things like that. You can see annual costs to run the building, and over here you can see efficiencies gained by different levels of application of extra insulation, different window frames, different types of glazing, the kind of light you use, the HVAC system efficiency, and all these sorts of things. So it was an amazing process, and it's been very useful for us in terms of selecting materials and construction approaches and envelope approaches to build the building. So I'm kind of glad we were required to do this, but at the same time, it was expensive and it did take a fair bit of time. So just closing up, the United Nations estimates that the planet is going to go from about 8 billion to 11 billion by the time we reach 2100. And I was watching a TED Talk by a guy named Vishaan Chakrabarti. He feels or estimates that to house all of these people, we need to build 2.4 trillion square feet of new built space. To give a sense of scale, and this is a quote from his TED Talk, that's equivalent to adding to the planet a New York City every month for the next 40 years. That's kind of mind-blowing. But he said it's not a sad or a scary talk because he's working with a team of engineers and architects, and they've decided that if you move to a model of 3-story multi-unit buildings and don't devote vast amounts of space to parking, and so you would develop in a kind of a transit-oriented development style. And if you put solar on the roofs, which is, you know, you can put enough solar on the roof of a building that's 3 stories housing lots of people because it's got a bigger roof as compared to a tower has the same number of people, and do a few other things, we can do this. He calls it the Goldilocks style. And he figures, or they figure, that France is big enough to house all 11 billion people if you were to develop in this way. I don't think France wants us to do that, but it does give us a sense that there is the possibility to house everyone if we pretty dramatically change how we go about providing housing. And I think that is my last slide. So I will turn it back over. What do I do to stop my presentation? So I'm assuming
a green
there we go.
shows.
So I've ended the slideshow. Susan, are you back on now?
No, she's not yet. Sean, my name is Catherine. I'm with the Suzanne on the CPL committee. It seems that she's just been kicked out of the meeting. I don't know why. So that's why
I'm back. Can you hear me? Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you,
Did I
Catherine.
totally blow my time allotment? I bet I did.
Well, the stars aligned. I wasn't there to push you. So if you did, that's great. Thank you for continuing to speak. Fabulous. Okay, well, great. No, I just came back online, so that's wonderful that things kept moving. And I think we have Frederick up next.
Yeah, we just need you to stop sharing the screen and then give us the presenter.
Okay, I'm looking for the place where I do the stop share.
Oh, let's see. Well, Dylan, can you please shift presenter?
Who am I shifting it to?
Frederick Van Rooyen.
Is that their name in here?
No, we're the city of Fredericton.
Oh, apologies. Thanks, Frederick.
Wonderful. All right. Everyone can see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. We'll move on. So thank you, Sean, for highlighting that, your development. So I guess I'll quickly just highlight sort of the policies and processes behind the two developments discussed today. So with Fredericton being a city in transition, it really became apparent that we needed policies that encourage more housing alternatives and innovative housing forms, such as micro homes, co-housing, and cluster housing that would ultimately support affordable housing. And so the growth strategy and our municipal plan include policies that recognize this need. So for example, the municipal plan specifically calls for the implementation of zoning bylaw regulations to help facilitate innovative housing forms and affordable housing. And with Fredericton being in a hot development market, our challenge hasn't been securing density, it's been securing affordable density. So looking at the two developments today, both represent innovative housing forms that our municipal plan is looking to enable. And from a zoning perspective, both developments went through a rezoning process to the Comprehensive Development District Zone, or the CDD zone. And this zone is intended to accommodate development that, due to its unique characteristics or innovation, requires specific regulations not available in other zones. So essentially, it's a flexible zone where site-specific regulations can be established subject to terms and conditions, as well as a development agreement. So for the micro boutique living development, we recognize the smaller unit sizes, not typically contemplated under the zoning bylaw, as well as a higher density. That's even higher than what we currently have in our standards for affordable housing, as well as a reduced parking rates, including the provision of car share spaces. And for 12 neighbors, we recognize the micro home or tiny home housing form. It's obviously a form not reflected in our zoning bylaw, as well as the social enterprise center being a very unique mixed use setup, as well as a reduced parking rate similar to the micro boutique development. And although different in their typology, both developments address a core need within the city of Fredericton, being affordable housing. And these developments have really highlighted the fact that there's no one-size-fits-all solution, and that affordable housing requires a comprehensive approach to address a diversity of housing needs and options. So, in my experience, when we were first discussing the 12 neighbors concept, trying to fit it in a standard zone was just unrealistic for such a unique community to design. And so, we had to come up with an alternative and a route to, realize this, as well as, Sean's development there. And the CDD zone was sort of the route that, was the most realistic to accommodate, these unique developments. And, with these developments being brought forward, we really had to rethink our approach and be more accommodating, if we want to address our housing challenges. So I guess to sum up, while zoning bylaws are, generally seen as these binary instruments that, we can't really count for every housing scenario. Now, what these developments have really showcased to us is that if we are going to make any progress in affordable housing, we need to be more flexible and open-minded to innovative housing forms. So I'll end it there. And, hopefully, the examples today have really, highlighted some of the innovation that the industry is bringing forward, and hopefully gets you thinking about, how we can be more flexible, in our policies moving forward. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Frederick. Thanks all for the amazing presentations. Marcel, your points on an identity of poverty, how we must work at identity and systems levels and focus on dignity and hope. Those wonderful points. And the fact that if we focus on relief efforts, we might help in the moment, but we can work against effective lasting change. Those are really valuable points. And Sean, your points about needing to honor the past and move to meet current needs, and how we need to kind of incentivize what we want and be careful not to indirectly incentivize what we don't want. They're just fabulous points. And I really like that you touched on planners and developers working together. And for that connects to what you were saying, that perhaps standard zoning practices need to be rethought to accommodate housing solutions. So it's great that there's these partnerships. With that, I'll turn it over to questions. Let's see, Catherine, I might ask for your help here. I'm just on a different platform now. For those who would like to ask a question, perhaps we can have you turn your camera on, and that'll indicate that you'd like to speak. And Dylan, if you could then please allow them to turn their mics on and ask questions, that would be great. Let's see, do we have any questions in the chat?
Yeah.
Catherine? Yeah? Okay.
I can do it, no
That
problem.
would be wonderful, thank you.
So for the first question in the chat, we have, does the CDD zone not have standard or allowed use, and those are all determined by development agreement? Is it okay with my French accent, or do you want me to repeat that question? It's in the chat, actually, if you have a question, or maybe the people just can open their micro and just ask the question. And
hi, Catherine, it's Xander here. I asked that question, so I can ask it in person. So I'm just wondering, from the last presentation, that CDD zone, is that basically just open, and then and everything has to go through rezoning, so it gets the Section 59 development agreement, and everything's kind of determined through that? Is that how that zone works?
Yeah, so I can address the question here. So the comprehensive development district, essentially, yes, it would require a rezoning process, and it would broadly permit, multi-residential, mixed use, commercial, institutional. So it's very broad in terms of the land uses permitted, and then we would scope the permitted uses in terms of the Section 59 development agreement more specifically, as well as the standards related to them.
great. I think we have another question from Tracy. I can read it, or Tracy, if you just want to jump in, or maybe I can read it also for City of, okay. So kudos, question to the City of Fredericton for thinking outside the box. Both of these developments are really interesting and address housing and social issue as well. What is the uptake for the development? Are they waiting list or vacant unit? So I think the question is for City of Fredericton.
What I would probably do is get Marcel to just comment on the uptake that he's seeing, and I know Sean would like to just jump in with respect to how his development is unfolding in terms of kind of the uptake with people wanting to live there. So I would just pass it on to Marcel first, and then to Sean.
Yeah, so quickly, I mean, if we had all 100 units built, we could occupy them all immediately. We have we are working with the coordinated access system, which is a system that all of the agencies that provide housing use to collaborate. And there's 160 individuals on that. But we've also provided a direct expression of interest form on our website, just so we can help guide people to that system if they reach out to us directly. We're well over 100 applications in the last, since we announced, and the enthusiasm's over the top. Interestingly, it's not just coming from people who we're aiming to help, which is those experiencing homelessness at the moment, but we have actually quite a wide range of interests in the community. Yeah.
So unfortunately, I don't have an answer to this. We're not expecting to open the doors until sometime next summer. Building a building of this size and complexity through the period of COVID has been a real challenge, both in terms of labor shortages, material shortages, cost escalations, and everything else that we've dealt with. But our construction team has done a great job of maneuvering through all of that. What we do tend to find, though, is, and what the target is to always be in the kind of the 15 or even as much as 20% market rate for the same number of bedrooms. And so that's the best I can offer right now. Hopefully we'll have a better sense of things in a few months, and I expect that you'll see some information going out, populating the Microboutique website, which I think right now talks about Fredericton, but doesn't talk about the kind of rates you may expect, although I could be wrong about that. They may have posted it. Oh, I just saw one for Microboutique and Antigonish and Wolfville, but I didn't catch all of it.
Yeah, so the next question was just what the average rental price point is on a Microboutique unit. So maybe.
Yeah, so my involvement is really on the planning and design side as opposed to the operations side. That information is all on their websites, though, if I'm not mistaken. So if people are curious, they can take a look at them. It's also, the units are very different. As I showed you, the first units in Antigonish were really small, like around 200 square feet. And the newer units are much bigger, and we have a much broader range of unit types. So, it's even going to depend, do you have a balcony or not? Do you have a view or not? These things will all influence the price on a per unit basis.
Great. Thank you, Sean. We have also a question for Sean again. The uptake on the Microboutique unit in Antigonish and Wolfville is high then. I think it's also the same.
Yeah, I mean, they're always full. There's never any problem renting them. The short stay rentals are also highly subscribed. There's never any challenge with renting those either. What is, I think, really beneficial about having the short stay is that it allows the 8-month leases for the student population that live in these two communities. But it also allows, on the whole, the revenue from short stay allows us to keep our longer term rents down as well a little bit. And it's great for the community because you're injecting visitors into the urban core of our communities. So it's good from the perspective of restaurants and amenity providers as well.
So just looking if we have more questions here in the chat. I think we have a people. Jody Clifford, maybe you might have a question.
Yeah, hi, thanks for that. And really great presentations. I find this very fascinating and innovative, and I think it's just what a lot of our communities need. Just a design layout question. I'm more out of curiosity than anything. I know putting those number of micro units into one lot is a design challenge, and I'm just curious what the conversation was like to ultimately have them face each other the way that they're laid out versus having the first two engage with the street, sort of enter from the street level. I assume that was a conversation at one point. Just curious as to what thought went into the current layout pattern of it.
So which of the micro projects were you thinking of?
Oh, sorry, I forget the name of the 12 neighbors, is it?
Oh, so that's the tiny homes.
Yes. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I've got the names wrong. Sorry.
Yeah. Would you like me to address that, Frederick?
Yes, go ahead, Marcel.
Okay. So it's for us, it was really about, well, there were a couple of factors. On the one hand, originally we were interested in and looked at what some might refer to as kind of more organic layouts. But one of the things in our conversation with people that we're aiming to help is that we felt that having really clear delineations around what is, let's say, my space versus our space was really important. And so that led us to a little bit more of a kind of a square layout. But in terms of the facing each other, it's really about community and wanting to create something that gives me both a sense of why tiny homes. So for example, we could do this more cost effectively by densifying, but this community, particularly those who won't use emergency services, often will struggle with too much social density. And so even sharing a wall is very difficult. So that we went to tiny homes, first of all, to optimize for the kind of lifestyle and for sense of ownership and dignity. And yet, it's important to feel like you're part of a community. So the homes facing each other socially gives us that little kind of neighborhoods of community. But then physically, it also gives us more density because we can put the next block back to back, which allows us to run, water, sewer, electrical kind of behind the homes and get a little more density for that infrastructure, while at the same time kind of creating those little hubs of community. We looked at, our properties on the hill and kind of faces has a view of kind of the whole south side of Fredericton and the river. And, on one hand, it'd be nice to have everyone facing that direction to see over the hill, but we felt it was more important to feel like you're part of a little small group. The other thing I would add is in our community in particular, it's designed to be very walkable and bikeable. So all of our paths, even our main road, even though it's a drivable road, it's designed to be walkable. So we don't actually have parking at each site. We have parking more kind of periodically through the community. So there's a bit of a park and walk, not too far, but most of our community members will have bikes more than cars. But those who might have cars, there's parking, but we don't want, let's say, a car at every tiny home, again, making it feel more like, like a community. So, yeah.
Thanks for that.
Just as a quick heads up, I've got a call coming in just a minute or two that I'll have to take, but I'm going to leave my screen running, and as soon as I'm finished, I'll come back to see if things are still going on.
Sure.
Thanks, Sean. And I realize we've got maybe the time for the one last point from Benjamin there in the chat, and then we'll wrap it up. Does that work, Catherine?
Yeah, that's good. So
Okay.
you want me to, I'm just asking the
Yes,
question.
please. That'd be
So,
great.
on the building side, on this tiny house project, how did you go through the building permit approval with this on the National Code construction? And so maybe, and then quick answer from you guys.
So I would just jump in from the city's perspective. When we were first reviewing this project, one of the things that we did was review it with our building inspectors. We just wanted to make sure that, in fact, everything was in line with the code and it actually could be built. But not only that, it's our building inspectors also went and met with Marcel, were on site, and reviewed these buildings as they were being constructed before they were even moved on site. So I think, Marcel, you can jump in here and just a little bit of context on that. But yeah, the building permit process and those inspectors were very much involved at the front end of the project, as well as kind of how this was evolved.
Yeah, and we built a model home first, both for that purpose and also to just work out some practical things. And we did make a few changes from our model home afterward. You know, as an example, when I showed the picture and I talked about the storage loft above, you'll notice that it's entirely enclosed with a door on the front. And that was something that the inspectors asked us to do, where we originally had it as an open storage loft. And so that way it complies, as it's really viewed more as an attic than a loft. So it isn't something someone could decide to go and turn into a bedroom since it didn't have stairs, that kind of thing. We may come up with different designs in the future that, you know, fit that. So it really does meet code in all respects, electrical, plumbing, and building wise, and in some ways, in many ways, exceeds minimum code requirements, particularly around, like, it's a little bit overbuilt in terms of its structure and our values, but you know, we felt that it was valuable to invest in that. And also in the affordable housing program that we're plugged into, there is, as a province, has what they call a green building standard, which is above code for our values. And so we're meeting that, and we're also aiming to meet a net zero standard, which gives us access to some energy credits. So those are various things driving the decisions.
Wonderful. Thanks. Oh, sorry. We're just going to have to wrap things up. We've come to we're a little over time, but I think that it's well worthwhile to get those answers in there. So yeah, it's time to bring things to a close. But as mentioned previously, our presenters have voiced that they are available for follow-up and questions. So we'll provide contact information when we send out the link to the recording of this session. Thank you to Marcello, Marcel, Sean, and Frederick for the fantastic presentations, Dylan with the Atlantic Planners Institute for technical support, and to all of you for joining us today. Time is a precious commodity, and I know we could probably have more discussion on this one, so hopefully we'll get to meet again sometime soon. But for now, all the best. Thank you for your time, and bye for now.
Thanks. See y'all.
Thanks all.
Thank you.